Hello, welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed already. I couldn't do this without you. It is time for some Doctor Who. Do you remember that I reviewed the Resurrection Plant a couple of weeks ago on this channel? Well, if you haven't seen it yet, then please do go and watch in preparation for this interview today, because I am joined by Will Hadcroft, the author of the Resurrection Plant, for a special interview. But before I bring him on, I'll take a moment to remind us all with a brief synopsis of the audiobook. The Doctor, Zoe and Jamie land on the planet called Calico 3, which is similar to Earth with advanced technology. They find out about the Resurrection Plant that rebirth people who get injured whilst working. The trio gets separated, the machine goes wrong, and they must defeat a terrifying monster. The Doctor also uncovers a secret close to home. The audiobook was read by Fraser Hines, who played Jamie, and now let's bring on the man who wrote it, Will Hadcroft.
And here he is.
Hi, Will. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Very fine, thank you, Rachel. Thanks for having me on. I'm a fan of your channel. I've been watching you for a while. I like the whole ethos of Chat About It, Don't Shout About It, and especially the idea that, you know, if you don't like something in Doctor Who, it's okay not to like it. And if you like something that somebody else doesn't like, that's also fine.
Yeah.
That's my approach generally to it. I don't get involved in all the wars and arguments. It's all, at the end of the day, it's a question of taste and preference, isn't it? And there are going to be things that some of us like and some of us don't.
Well, exactly, and that's my whole ethos with anything that we see, including Doctor Who. Yes. So, well, I must say thank you very much for those kind words. That was very kind of you. And let me thank you for sending this over. I have it right here. No, it was really great to listen to, and thank you for agreeing to come on to be interviewed. But I really do need your question. It's a burning question.
Okay.
Are you ready for it? Are you
ready for it?
Which is your Doctor and why?
Well, I have two, actually. They're both from the classic series. Tom Baker was the Doctor for the entirety of my primary school life. So I was 4 when he took it over, and I was just approaching my 11th birthday when he left. So I made the transition to secondary school in September 1981. So Tom Baker was the Doctor through the whole of my primary school life, and I loved him. The other favourite is Colin Baker, who took it over when I was just approaching age 14. My birthday's in May, so Colin took it over in March that year, 1984. And I was 16 when he left. But I absolutely loved Colin Baker. He was the right Doctor for my teenage years, you know, because I was a little bit out of sorts and a little bit prickly myself. So I related to the way he played the character. Yeah. So the two Bakers, yeah, they're my favourite.
The two Bakers, oh, that's brilliant. Well, Colin is my favourite. He's on my wall.
I know, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to meet him a few years back. Have you ever met Colin? You must have done. You must have
I've met him a few times, yeah. And I wrote an autobiographical book some years ago, and he endorsed it. So that was lovely.
Oh, brilliant.
So a bit of a full circle moment there of being a fan in my teens, and then as an adult, he endorses something that I've done. So yeah, I've known Colin superficially since 2004, and I bumped into him in the Blackpool Doctor Who exhibition in 1985, and he was in full costume. No, it wasn't. It was August '84. That's right, because he just opened the Space Invader ride, or whatever it's called, the roller coaster on the Pleasure Beach. And then they drove him up to the exhibition in full costume to visit that, unannounced. So I was in there when he suddenly walked out of the darkness, you know, in full costume. I was absolutely flabbergasted. And I reminded him of this years later. Of course, he's not going to remember that. But to me, that was a big moment. That I was, 14 years old. I tape recorded the soundtrack of the Twin Dilemma onto audio cassette because we didn't have a video then. And I knew the dialogue by heart. So to really love his characterization of the Doctor, even in the Twin Dilemma, which I know is not popular with many. When he walked out of the shadows in that exhibition, I was beside myself. My mother had seen a crowd gathering outside it and had come running in through the back entrance, shouting, "William, William, Doctor Who's here, Doctor Who's here." And I had bought the single of the theme music, the Peter Howell theme. I already owned it twice before. Every time the Doctor changed, I had to buy the version of the theme with their face on it. So I had the same record 3 times over. And I had it in my hand, and I was absolutely dumbstruck. So my mum snatched the record out of my hand and handed it to him. So, "Would you sign my lad's record, please?" So unfortunately, he wrote his signature in felt tip, and it's all faded away now. Otherwise, I would have brought it to show you. But it's gone. But yeah, treasured memories. Yeah, he means a lot to me, Colin Baker.
Yeah, no, he's a brilliant Doctor. I love him as a Doctor, but that must have been a complete shock, just being on that ride and then that, oh my goodness, you're here. You're here with that loud coat. And it's just, oh, brilliant.
And my mother was really impressed by the costume as well. She, I remember discussing it with my grandma when we got home, and she said, "That's not cheap material, that's not cheap material." And she was really impressed by the quality of the costume. Not so
You
much
can
what
tell.
it looked like, but
Yeah,
what
that's
it was
fair.
made, what it was made from.
Yeah. No, you can tell by the cut and the shape of it and how well it generally fitted him, actually. It was a really good cut on him, that it was expensive material that they used. To actually hear it, though. Oh,
And
brilliant.
I never had any problem with it either at the time. I was a young boy. I thought it was hilarious that he couldn't understand why nobody liked it, the character of the Doctor, why they all thought it was terrible, and he thought it was the height of fashion. That amused me. As a boy, I understand it now later on, all these years later, why it wasn't really appropriate for the character.
Yeah.
But as a youngster watching it, I thought it was funny. I loved it.
Oh no, that's fair. That's fair. No. Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, so there's been some burning questions from the people who have asked these questions. Some of them want to know, and this is, I guess, quite a generic one, is how did you get into writing?
Well, I've always been keen on it from childhood up. I remember being about 7 years old and writing a story, and the teacher, praised me for it, and my mother was taken with the fact that I'd been praised so highly for this story. So it had been there from very young. Doctor Who, I can remember getting the Target novelizations off the shelf from the school library. And I used to open I'd read it, and then I'd look at the back, the flap on the back where it said about the author. And if it was Terence Dicks, and it usually was, there'd be a photograph of him and the blurb about who Terence Dicks was. And I can remember very young, 10 or 11 or something like that, thinking, I want to be like him. So the desire to write a Doctor Who story had been there from at least age 10.
Wow.
And then I used to submit to, in my early 20s, I would submit to Virgin's New Adventures range, the novels that followed the series after its demise, and the Missing Adventures, and then BBC Books after that, with the 8th Doctor Adventures and the Past Doctor Adventures.
Yeah.
And then Big Finish after that, so every time there's been a new iteration, I've always sent things in and heard either nothing back or a very kindly worded rejection. And then I was 49 when I was finally approached by BBC Audio.
Oh, so they approached you. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, they approached me. Yeah. So the editor, John Ainsworth, he knew of me.
Yeah.
He'd known about me for years.
Yeah.
I met him years and years ago, and he worked on a couple of things that I'd done with a little self-publishing setup that I'd got going with a friend. Well, not self-publishing. What would you call it? Indie publishing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd set up this little company, and we were finding our feet with it, and we needed someone to do some typesetting for us. And I knew he knew how to do it because he'd edited magazines. He'd edited Cult Times. He was an assistant editor on Doctor Who magazine, and I knew he had the equipment. So I asked him to work on those books with us, and he did. So he'd been sort of in and out of my life professionally across a number of years. So when the producer, Michael Stevens, said to him that they need new blood, they need new authors coming in, he thought of me. So I got an email in June 2019. Yeah, it was 1 month after my mother had died. That's how I remember it, asking me to pitch ideas.
How many ideas did you pitch?
Well, they have a standard model, so they ask for 3. They ask for three combinations of Doctors and Companions and 3 story ideas, and then they choose the one they like best.
All right, that's interesting. I didn't know that's how they worked, actually. So, well, seeing as we mentioned 3 ideas, obviously you don't need to be specific here because obviously don't want you to give it away entirely, but what types of story ideas did you actually pitch to the BBC?
I can't remember what the other 2 were. Because my email account with all the emails in is busted and I can't get to it. So a lot of the exchanges are gone. As I tried to find them, which is a shame. I know I pitched. I would have pitched a Colin one because obviously he's a big favourite, and I can't remember what the other one was. But the one that they went for was actually a rejected pitch. It was originally called The Sanctity of Death, and I pitched it to BBC Books for a 7th Doctor and Ace story. So The Sanctity of Death had the planetoid that's like the Industrial Revolution. It had the Gestalt creature in it, and it was the 7th Doctor and Ace. And I think it was around 2003 that it was rejected by BBC Books. So then it's a story idea that I'd always liked. So when I got invited to pitch to BBC Audio, I thought I'm gonna pitch The Sanctity of Death, but I switched 7th Doctor and Ace out for 2nd Doctor, Jamie and Zoe. 2 reasons. One, I knew that John liked Patrick Troughton's Doctor the best, and I thought I might stand a better chance of being commissioned. And the other ones was that once I'd got the idea of Time Lord involvement, it just hit me what a fascinating thing it would be to set it in a period of the Doctor Who history before the audience knew anything about Time Lords. If it was set before the War Games, you can play around with the idea that the Doctor knows who these people are, but Jamie and Zoe must never find out, and no one must ever know that he is one himself. And once I'd got that, I thought, this is a cracking idea. So I thought, we'll have the 2nd Doctor, Jamie and Zoe, instead of the 7th Doctor and Ace. And they went for it. I'm so glad they did. Sorry, go on.
Oh, God. I was going to say, was there something actually specific that they really liked about it that made them choose it? Or was it just everything in general? What exactly, if they ever told you?
What I did, what they asked for, you see, once they've said, yes, we like this one, then they asked for a 2-page story breakdown, scene breakdown. So you have to basically describe the entire thing from beginning to end, the various scenes across 2 A4 pages. And then they would make their decision based on that. But because obviously I was keen to be commissioned, this was my very first professional piece of Doctor Who work, very keen to impress. I thought what I'll do is I'll write up one of the scenes to demonstrate how it would read. And the scene was the penultimate scene. It's the one, without giving a lot away, let's just say it's the one between the Doctor and Wren in the office near the end. Yeah. You know
got
what I'm
you.
talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
So I wrote up that conversation and that scene because I thought it was quite a powerful scene and helps kind of pitch the tone of it in a way. So I wrote that up and added it with the synopsis. And I got a message back from John that producer Michael Stevens really liked that write-up, that scene. And maybe that was the clincher. I don't know for sure. Maybe they would have commissioned it anyway. But the fact that the producer liked that scene a great deal must have been part of what clinched it for me.
So you chose to use the second Doctor, Pat Troughton, and Zoe and Jamie. What was it specific about them that made you choose those three to use in this story?
Well, their history for me as a fan, they are my favourite second Doctor lineup, really. I appreciate Ben and Polly and Victoria later on, but those three from that era are my favourite. The very first time I saw any old Doctor Who, old as in prior to Tom Baker, was in the Five Faces season in November 1981. The Five Faces of Doctor Who, which was on BBC Two. So I would have been 11 then. And I'd seen the regeneration from Tom to Peter in March 81. So it was a big time to be a Doctor Who fan then, because Tom was the Doctor. You know, the idea that somebody else was going to play it was a massive idea, and something to wrap your head around. My mother and father had talked about the previous three Doctors, so I knew about those. Then Doctor Who Weekly started to be published, so I could see photographs of them. But I'd never seen any black and white episodes until the Five Faces of Doctor Who. And to represent the Troughton era, they had the Crotons, and it was that lineup of Pat, Fraser, and Wendy. So that was very, very interesting. Then, of course, we get the Five Doctors in '83, and they are in it. It's a little cameo sequence, isn't it? The Doctor Brigadier, and then they bump into apparitions of Jamie and Zoe. Yeah. So that reinforced them. And then, of course, we have Colin and Fraser in the Two Doctors. And somewhere in between, I think the very first VHS release of a second Doctor adventure, The Seeds of Death. I remember going into Woolworths in Bolton and seeing the cassette high up on this big wardrobe with a few other things. And I collared one of the people working there, shop assistants, that's the phrase I was trying to find. And I said, "Is that for sale, that video up there?" She said, "Yes, it is." And I said, "Right, will you put it on one side for me? I'm going to the bank to draw out £10 and then I'm going to purchase it now." I was so determined. Oh, that's
so funny. That's exactly the sort of thing I would have done. Yes.
So there's this kind of little storyline in my life of those three. So when I decided on it's going to be pre-war games, and to play around with the Doctor knows what's going on, but nobody else does, I thought it's got to be those three: Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe. Yeah. I just love the way they interact with one another.
Yeah, me too. They're a great combination.
Dynamic, isn't there? Yeah.
Very dynamic. Obviously, they've all got a lot of different traits about them, but obviously with an audiobook, and you've only got about an hour to do this story in, what specific traits did you decide to use for the Doctor, Jamie, and Zoe for this book? Why? And then what traits did you decide to disregard for this story, with obviously keeping it into in respect of the actual character as well?
Yeah. I think I'll answer it in reverse. What I was keen to discard was the caricatures that have grown up around them, especially with the Doctor going, "Oh my giddy aunt, oh crumbs," and "Here's a gobstopper." I thought I need to sort of just dial that down a bit, because when anyone impersonates Patrick, that's what they do. They, "Oh dear, oh goodness me," and it's very funny and everything. But if you overdo that, it can rob the character of his dignity, I think, and the serious tone of the story can be affected. But I did want to sort of hint at his Chaplin-esque hobo personality. So there's a scene where he runs to a lift, an elevator, and it talks about him arms and legs all over the place, like somebody out of a black and white silent movie, which is of course referencing Charlie Chaplin and all those sort of characters. And it was nice that Matt Michael from Doctor Who magazine picked up on that, that I described the second Doctor that way, and he felt that I'd nailed it. But then I also wanted quieter moments for the second Doctor, because in the TV show there are moments where he gets very serious indeed, and then you get to see who he really is, don't you? Yes. So I wanted the facade and then who he really is. So I was focusing on that. I wanted Jamie to be given something to do. It's difficult with a character who doesn't understand things and is always asking questions. I thought I don't want it to be just that, a cipher for explaining things to the audience. So there's a bit more action than he might normally have got on television. And with Zoe, I remember in The Invasion, when she was talking about computer stuff in The Invasion, and one of the soldiers says, "Oh, can't we keep her, sir? She's so much prettier than a computer." And I thought, well, maybe we should do some computer stuff with Zoe, because she is supposed to be from the late 21st century, an astrophysicist and all of that. So let's not forget that that's what she is and use it. So I think I got the balance right between the three of them.
I think you did, yeah.
And I know, because John, my editor, he was very taken with a particular scene discussing the sonic screwdriver, where one of the characters says that looks like it's come from a very sophisticated race. And the Doctor says it's not so much come from a sophisticated race as a sophisticated mind. Oh, civilized, that was the word, civilized mind. And John, in his notes back to me after the first draft, said, you've captured him perfectly. That's exactly the sort of thing he would say. So I knew I was onto it by then. I was getting it right.
You can sort of hear the voice in your head as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I reckon. I get a bit like that when I'm trying to plan a video, but I can hear it all playing out in my head, and I know how it's going to sound. So yeah, I could imagine that would have happened for you, actually. So yes, and you do have the distinct traits of the characters in there, and you did it very well. And they all get, I think, an equal amount of time.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean. So
yeah, I started to experience what all the writers down through the ages have said about Doctor Who when they've had to write for more than one companion, and that is, what do you give them to do? You know. So I started. I mean, in my next one, which we may talk about another time, I've got 4 of them. I've got a Doctor and 3 companions, and it's like, what do? I lock one of them away in the TARDIS for a bit. You know, what do I do? So yeah, it was interesting writing one for proper to start having the same problems that real Doctor Who authors have. You know. But I gave them plenty to do.
Yes, you did. You did. And that's the good thing. Having them stuck in the TARDIS is, well, as an actress, I would have imagined having to be stuck in the TARDIS on screen would have been like, oh, I just want to do something else. I just want to be involved in the story. And they can do it. You can take them all out, but you just have to divide them up and in a way that works for the story. And that's the tricky part.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, poor old Nyssa in The Visitation, making a machine out of a vacuum cleaner pipe and an upturned sink, you know. It went on for a while, didn't it, that?
It certainly did. But she didn't show it. She didn't show it in her performance.
No, it was very well done. And certainly at the time, I didn't even notice that they just parked her off in the TARDIS. You know, as a viewer, aged 12 or 11 or 12, I just accepted it. But once you understand the devices of writing a story, you can see what's going on in the writer's mind.
Going from your original pitch then to the final audiobook, how much of the original concept made it into the book? I know you've already said that you switched out the Seventh Doctor and Ace, so
Yeah.
those have changed already. But was there anything
Yeah.
else that changed?
There were quite a few changes. Yeah. First of all, the very first change was the title, because it was called The Sanctity of Death. In that, if you're being worked to death and resurrected, and then worked to death again and resurrected again and worked to death over and over and over and over ad infinitum, then the phrase "the sanctity of life" becomes meaningless. That was the idea behind the title, and I still prefer that title. I think it's got quite a poetic edge to it. However, what John said to me, and quite rightly so, is that that doesn't really describe the story. You know, if someone's browsing through Amazon or in if there are any left, an HMV or somewhere like that, and flicking through the CDs, the sanctity of death, they felt, didn't really describe anything about the story. It wasn't descriptive. So they said that since from quite early on in the story, they refer to the resurrection plant, this old mill that's been turned into this means of bringing people back to life, that it should be called that. So I was very keen to stay on the right side of them. So I didn't argue about it. I thought, all right, then it's the resurrection plant. But there were lots of other things, because I'd written far too much. I mean, John had said from the outset, look, it's 10,000 words for an hour-long story. And I'd got onto somewhere near 30,000.
Gosh.
Because I'm used to writing full-length novels, you see. I've written novels in the past. So I'd written a whole scene, you know, the family that are in it, whom they meet at the very beginning. There was a whole scene of the little girl working in the foundry and being killed. And it went on for several pages. There was another scene where I wanted to show the family interacting before the terrible accident, so you get an idea of what they were all like. And all of that had to go just to get it down to the right word count. But the great thing is, I mean, I learned so much on doing this first one. The great thing is that you chuck out all this stuff and just keep the essentials. Everything that was in that 2-page synopsis is still in the story. So I dumped pages and pages and pages of nice little scenes in their own right, but they weren't crucial to the story. So what's happened is we've tightened the whole thing up to just 10 pages, not 10 pages, 20 A4 pages, 10,000 words, which is why it has that kind of action-packed feel to it. Because you have to discard as much as you can without losing the story, and then tighten up what's left. So in the end, ditching a load of stuff went in its favor, because it rattles along.
Oh, it does.
I was very happy with the end result.
Yeah, I ended up listening to it twice, because when I was go to do the review, sometimes I'll just listen through once and I'm okay. And I ended up realizing, I was like, no, I'm going to need to listen to it again to make sure I fully understood what was happening and what was going on. Not because like I'm stupid, but it was just because it was going da, 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 and I appreciate that. And do you know what's great about, you know, cutting it down is you've always got something else now for another potential future Doctor Who story that you can use that material for. Yeah.
Another thing as well is that I didn't want it to be boring. Sometimes audio, because everything's dialogue and sound effects, really. If the plot isn't moving along at a reasonable pace and it's getting a bit too talky, I start daydreaming, listening to audio things.
I do that.
So I didn't want to lose the audience. So I needed events, you know. But at the same time, I didn't want it to go rattling along so much that the audience felt like they were out of breath. I used to get that in the early David Tennant on television, where it felt like it was this. Then the Doctor shouts at everybody and then pulls a lever and fixes it at the end. And it felt like I was out of breath by the time the closing credits rolled. So I was keen, while I wanted it to have momentum, the Resurrection Plant, I was keen not to leave everybody out of breath, because I'd packed it so full.
So
stuff.
it's not a 5-second resolution, so to speak, like it can
Yeah,
be sometimes
yeah.
in the series, and especially this current series of Doctor Who that we've just had. But oh, there was a question that I've been burning to ask you, and this was from my review. So
Okay.
you know that you have the pods for
Mm,
to resurrect with. That reminded me of the Mark and the Rani.
mm.
Were you inspired by that in any way, or was it just coincidence?
Consciously, no, I wasn't. I didn't think. I know the scenes you mean with those dinosaurs growing in,
Yeah.
in those jars. I might have got it from old movies, sci-fi movies. Like there's one called The Demon Seed. I don't know if you've seen that one.
No, I've not seen
I
it.
think Robert Vaughan's in it, and it's about a computer, a sentient computer that runs his house, much as the way we have computers now that can close your curtains for you, as a command. This was way ahead of the reality, and the idea was, what if this thing became sentient, and the house ends up becoming a prison. I think Julie Christie may have been in it as well. She gets trapped in the house because the computer has turned on her. And it has this sort of chamber or tank that's like an industrial embryo, and it grows. I think it gets cells from her, and it grows a human body inside this tank. So maybe residual memories of that. I'm wondering if David Cronenberg directed that, because it was one of those controversial movies of the day, and he was famous for doing stuff like that, pushing the envelope that little bit more. But yeah, I'm trying to think of other things that have done that. Embryos growing inside a tank, but it's a common sci-fi trope, isn't it? That so it was obvious that if this was sort of an industrial setting, they would have chambers with embryos ready to be triggered, and then they would have the DNA of the original person grow to adult size, and then they would have receptors in their heads that receive the consciousness from the body that's dying. And then they will be rebirthed, and they'd come out with all goo and slime all over the place and have to have the umbilical cord cut. So I think it's probably a combination of several sources that I've seen across the years in movies and television.
Okay, that's fine. I was just like, oh, I wonder. Having like also reviewed it on the Sensesphere the other day as well. I was just like, I really want to know. Well, speaking of tropes, there are quite a few monsters, aliens, I should say, that are extremely common in Doctor Who, like Cybermen, but they're not really tropes, but we get them all the time. And Daleks, we've got the Master, but you went with something that is not as common to see in Doctor Who, so to speak. And I wasn't actually expecting that at all. I was a little bit surprised, actually. What made you decide to go with that type of monster as opposed to something the audiences are more familiar with? Because this type of monster also can present itself in different ways throughout Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to go with that?
Well, I needed a catastrophe to happen. I mean, you can have the story of people being resurrected back to life and worked to death and round.
Yeah.
And you can say, oh, this is Time Lord technology that's been augmented and that's how it's happening. But you need a disaster. You need action. You need a catastrophe. So I needed something to go wrong. So I had the idea of a huge explosion. Several people are killed. And then the brainwave comes. What if they were all resurrected into one body? And you've got all these consciousnesses vying for prominence within the mind of the one creature. I suppose there might be sort of throwbacks to the biblical character Legion. My name is Legion, for there are many of us. That's probably going on at the back of my mind. And it's also, a Doctor Who story with a monster in it, but not, as you say, a traditional monster, something a bit more interesting. and also the moral dilemma of the people who are all trapped in there, including the little boy. It's a different kind of dilemma than we've got to stop this monster, you know?
It's very different. Mm.
Yeah. So I was keen for it to feel traditional but new as well. And so I was able to juxtapose a typical 1969 black and white Doctor Who story on the one hand, but push it, you know, as far as I can, make it new and fresh, much like the Virgin Missing Adventures did in the 1990s, of which I was a fan. I wanted it to have that flavour.
Yeah, and I think you do. And the resolution isn't too simple. It's attainable within the listener's brain to work out what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And it does actually work really well within the story. So
Yeah.
I really liked it. I was so surprised that you went with that. And if you, by the way, subscribers, if you don't know what we're talking about, you obviously have to go and purchase the CD.
You know what to do.
You know what to do. If you would like to. And I also actually do give some other examples in my review videos. If you want to check that out, you can also find out there as well. But obviously, listen to the story.
with the ending, I wanted the Doctor to have a dilemma, because normally the Doctor fixes the situation, they go off in the TARDIS, and then it's more adventures. And I thought, well, in this case, no. He has to pay a price a little, and maybe compromise in a way that he wouldn't normally do, because he has you know, the thing is, he has things that he needs to protect, things to do with himself, and how far would he go in protecting them? You know,
well, exactly.
Because normally he tops the baddie, everyone's happy at the end, and they move on. It can't simply be that for this one. And those who've heard it will know what I mean. Those who haven't, get to Amazon. You know what to do.
You know what to do. It's so much so that it even gets questioned by two people that are with the Doctor.
Yeah.
So yes. Were you, by the way, required to fit the story in with the TV stories that are like currently going on today? Was there anything like canon wise that you were expected to include, or was that just not really?
That's a very good question. With regard to the canon of the Patrick Troughton era and around those days, all I had to do is not contradict anything that's established in the television program.
Fair. Yeah.
The canon of sort of 2019 onwards, I was in a bit of a dilemma, because the idea of the sex change in a regeneration was very new then.
Yes.
And I was dealing with Time Lordy type stuff. I mean, in the original pitch, when they die and then they're resurrected back to life, in the original version of it, they come back exactly as they were, but without their injuries.
Okay.
But John said to me after the first draft, he said, you know, if these people are using Time Lord technology to do this, maybe it should be a bit like a regeneration, and the characters come back looking different. So I thought, okay, we'll take that, and then I had to consider the sex change aspect of regeneration, which was quite new in Doctor Who at the time that I was writing this. And I thought, do I just ignore that? No, because no one had asked me to use it. But I had a bit of a dilemma for a while. I thought, do I just ignore that and have them coming back in the same sex and gender but looking different? Or do I honour what's recently been introduced into the series? So, as you know, I do tackle that sex change aspect a couple of times in it. One of them was really my reply to the television series. It was I didn't like the way it had been done on television,
which is fair. Yeah.
In that I thought it was a wasted opportunity, really. Instead of exploring gender and sex and introducing a reason for it happening, which you could then explore, it was kind of done in this very whimsical way, like with Missy, for example. And then later on, that Time Lord General in Hellbent, who's a middle-aged, grey-haired man, shot at point-blank range, regenerates, gets up as a young female person of colour and says, "Oh, thank goodness I'm a woman again. All that testosterone, how do you cope?" Something along those lines. And that kind of dialogue irritated me. I thought, I appreciate it. It's a funny joke. It's a joke. It was done for the sake of humour. So I get that, but I felt it should have been, for a race that's used to changing sex when they regenerate, it would be normal.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't comment on testosterone and estrogen and all the rest of it, which betrays what I felt, that betrayed what was going on screen, that this was new to Doctor Who. Whereas the Time Lords, if they were used to this happening all the time, they wouldn't be treating it as unusual. They would just go, oh, I'm a woman again, and then move on. So there's a guy in my story who's birthed after a terrible accident, and he gets up and they're wiping him down with towels from all the goo, and he says, "Oh well, I'm a man again. Well, that's something, I suppose." And then he moves on. It's so casual, and I felt that if you're going to say that Time Lords were always able to change sex during regeneration, then you should present it that way. That it's unusual to the viewer, but it's not unusual to us. You know, we've known about this for thousands of years. So that was just my little answer to that problem.
Yeah.
And then later on, there's a payoff again when it happens again near the end, and I do it again, where the Doctor, as far as the Doctor is aware, has never changed gender during a regeneration. So he asks the individual, "What's it like?" Which I think is what he would ask. What's it like? Because he's only ever regenerated once, as far as he knows. So he's never experienced a change in gender or sex or any of that. So I address that. So throughout the story, there are little niggles that I've had with the television series here and there, and I've dropped little bits in to address those things, but they're just for me, really. It doesn't really affect how the story unfolds or anything like that.
They're just tiny little bits. Yeah. No.
That sonic screwdriver you picked up in your review, that Jamie called it a magic wand.
Yeah.
Well, I put that in because I felt in the modern series it's used like a magic wand. And
It
irritates me. I don't want it to go and do ropes when someone's tied up with ropes, you know, or change the channel on a radio. It's go bzz, 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 and change the channel on a radio. No, it's a sonic device that disrupts sound and electrical equipment and so forth. But there's a limit to what it should be able to do, I think.
I think so.
So that's just a little gag from me, that when Jamie says it's a magic wand.
Much appreciated, because I don't like the sonic screwdriver. As you may have gathered, I've said it a couple of times on some videos and some live streams that I don't really like it. It's too I don't know what the word is for it, but yeah, it's too like I can just do anything and solve my problem, and that's an issue, because it takes away from the creative writing. When they ditched it in Wild Blue Yonder, yes, okay, it was a bit naff because they shoved it into the TARDIS to fix the TARDIS. I was like, great, it's gone, and out of the story. Did you
not like it in the old series either? Were you glad to see the back of it in the Visitation?
I was glad to see the back of it, so to speak, but it's better in the old series than it is in the new series.
It's used sparingly, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So my next question is, what is your favourite part of this audiobook? And it's difficult to be your own critique, but what is your least favourite part of the audiobook?
That's a tough one. Because I'm going to admit it now, I love it all. Right, and there are no parts that I dislike, and that's not just of my writing, but the way it sounds, the way it's read, I just absolutely love it from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
What's my favourite scene? I quite like the one that John Ainsworth picked up on about the sonic screwdriver, where the other character is talking to realizes it's an off-world piece of technology. And when the doctor says it's not the product of a civilization, it's the product of a civilized mind, meaning that he invented it. I quite like that exchange, because although it's about the sonic screwdriver, it's also, there's a bit of tension between the two.
Yeah.
As the doctor realizes he's been found out, really. And the bad guy, and it's realizing that this little impish guy, this comical Chaplin-esque character, there's more to him. And I quite like the way that plays off one against the other.
Yeah. Do you know the bit I really like? I really like when Zoe's talking about the computers, and there's just she has this moment of exasperation where she feels like she's talking to Jamie and having to explain everything. Yeah. That made me laugh.
That as well. That bit about that one word in the code that's wrong.
Yes,
I actually, there's a good friend of mine called Anthony, who's a computer programmer. He does it for a living. And I went to him, and I said, because I don't know anything about computer programming. So I went to him and I said, right, I need a problem for Zoe to solve. And I explained the situation. I said, it's a combination of ancient technology and high-tech stuff melded together. And I said, I need something to go wrong in the programming to cause something physical to go wrong in the machinery. But I don't know what would do it. So, and something that she would spot that they would miss, because they're not really that savvy with technology like me. And he came up with that and/or thing.
That's brilliant.
And he said the computer wouldn't recognize it as an error because it's proper coding. So if you did a self-diagnostic, if the computer did a self-diagnostic, it wouldn't notice there was anything wrong, and it would take a programmer to see it and correct it. So I thought, right, I'll have that. I bunged him a free CD when it came out for his contribution.
That's brilliant. Just that one tiny little thing. That would be the sort of thing
my producer, Michael, he questioned that. He said, this doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think it's realistic. And then I had to say through my editor, John, it is realistic. I got it from a real computer programmer, and so they kept it.
Yeah, no, I knew it was realistic immediately because my brother works in computers as well. So I knew exactly what she was going on about. Yeah, it was one of my favorite bits. Very much sounded like my brother.
Well, thank Anthony for that one then.
Ah, Fraser Hines.
There he is, my man.
Yes, he reads the audiobook and he does a brilliant job of it. He sounds so much like Patrick Troughton that I actually thought it was his son, David, at first. And then I was like, no, it can't be, because it's only Fraser doing it. He does a really good impression.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
It's fantastic. I was.
And he said the lines the way I imagined he would as well. There's a scene where the doctor realizes about, I think it's when he realizes that all the consciousnesses have been uploaded to one person. And I wrote it, and I heard it in my head of Patrick going, oh dear, like that. And I was thinking of in The Five Doctors when he realizes they're playing the game of Rassilon, and he says it's a brigadier, oh dear, I've just had a terrible thought. So in my mind, when I wrote the line, I imagined it being delivered that way. But of course, I had no idea how Fraser was going to read it. But when it's read, he does it exactly that way. Oh, dear. And I thought, wow, I thought it, I wrote it, he's recognized it and done it.
Yeah. That
brilliant payoff for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. That also shows how well he knows Patrick Troughton, how well he knows his doctor as well. It just, I mean, they worked together closely for a long time, didn't they? So of course. So well, did you go to the recording?
No, it's not like a big finish where they'll invite the writer in. But then if you think about how it's done, an audio original is just one voice. So you're going to have a recording booth with the actor in it. You're going to have the producer, Michael, overseeing it, and a sound recordist. And that's it. Just 3 people. So some have said to me they're cheapskates. They could have invited you down to watch the recording, but I think it's also, yeah. What would I do? Just sit there watching him read it? You know, there was one downside. It's only a niggly thing. It's nothing important. But when I came up with the name Reimai, I, in my mind, pronounced that Raimi. So when I wrote that the manuscript, it was Raimi. And he told me when I met him there in that picture, he said he was struggling with a number of the names, because how do you pronounce these made up names? So he and the producer were deciding it amongst themselves how they are pronounced, and the producer Michael told him, I think it's pronounced Raimi. So I'm stuck with that now. Raimi is Raimi, and I'm used to it now. I'm not bothered.
Yeah.
But it never even occurred to me that he would need some guidance on that, how to pronounce the name. It's actually an anagram of Marie, Raimi, because that's my stepdaughter. She passed away in 2018. My adult stepdaughter. So in honor of her and as a little gift to her mother, I thought I'll have one of the characters an anagram of Marie.
Oh, that's cute.
So that's where Raimi comes from. But it's interesting that they had to debate amongst themselves without me being present how to pronounce the names.
Of course, though, that's a learning curve, because you do have another one coming out, which if you have got some difficult names to pronounce, you would have been able to say it in advance and let them know in advance. We'll get to the other one a bit later. But but yeah, so you would have been able to give those notes over in advance. You know, it's always the first thing that you do with any project. I've been the same, where you learn a lot the first time around and then you apply it to your second time. It's brilliant. By the way, where was this photograph taken?
That's in, let me think, was it Hooverville or Big Finish Day? Hooverville, yeah, that's right, yeah. Because Big Finish Day, the last one they did, was it before COVID, the last one they did? Or after? I can't remember. But anyway, Derby. It's Steve Hatcher's arrangement with the Derby Quad, where they had Big Finish Day for 3 years, I think, 3 or 4 years, and where they hold all their Hoovervilles. So I went there as a paying guest. I was delighted to find that Fraser was there as an invited guest. So Steve Hatcher said, "Would you like to sit alongside Fraser and sign some CDs?" Which was very kind of him, because this was my very first one and no one knew who I was. So it was very kind of him to do that. And I'll be there again this year.
Oh, fantastic.
Signing some CDs, yeah. This one and the new one that's due to come out, yeah.
Yeah. What about this photograph?
That one would be in Sheffield, I think. Yeah, Sheffield. Phantom, is it Phantom who organised that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what the name of the actual convention was, but yeah, Sheffield, that would be a year or two ago, that, in somebody's rather lovely replica of the Hartnell TARDIS, yeah.
Oh, it's the Hartnell TARDIS. Ooh.
The Hartnell TARDIS, the windows are the proper proportion, so I was very pleased to know that. And yeah, standing in the doorway of the Hartnell TARDIS. Yeah, I like that picture. Yeah.
That's a nice picture. Were you there signing CDs, or were you just there?
Just as a punter then. Yeah.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Got to meet Colin again, so that was good.
Okay, so this one. So on the right hand side, we've got the Doctor Who Weekly. Is there a story behind this photograph?
There is indeed. Yeah, Call the Shots was a competition, as you can see there. So this is the issue containing the results of the competition. I think the issue that had the actual competition in had Romana on the front in her Tom Baker, you know, from Destiny of the Daleks, where she's dressed up as Tom Baker. I think that was on the front of the original competition. So what it was to win Doctor Who sound effects album, as you can see there. So it's had all the sound effects from a fair few stories. Very frustratingly, it does not have the TARDIS takeoff and landing, which is utterly bizarre. I think, for a Doctor Who sound effects record.
Why would you forget that?
It's got the interior of the TARDIS and the doors and the scanner screen and various gun noises and all sorts of atmospheres for planets and stuff, but not the takeoff and landing. Anyway, that's by the by. So the competition was to do with the comic strip. So it was to come up with a gun noise, right? So you know how on a comic strip you'll see someone's firing a gun, there's a ray, and then over the top there'll be a word, a sound effect word to describe what the gun is sounding like. And you had to come up with that word. And I can remember at age 10, scratching my head, I couldn't think of anything. So I said to my mum, I need to think up a word for a gun noise for this competition. So she said, how about, so she paused for a second, and she said, Zweesk. So I thought, well, how do you write that down? So she said, Z-W-E-E-E-E-E-S-K, exclamation mark. So I put that on a postcard, send it into Doctor Who Weekly. And then, however many months later or weeks later, I came home from school and we'd had a trip to York. So I was very tired. I'd come back late. And there was a big square envelope on the mantelpiece. And I walked right past that. I was so tired. Went in to get my tea, my dinner. And my mother said, and my grandma was there as well. And my mother said, have you got the latest Doctor Who Weekly? And I hadn't got this one yet. And so she said, well, I have. And she pulled it out. And I thought, well, what's she showing me this for? And then she opened it up to that page. And she said, have a look down this page at these names. And then about a third of the way down the left-hand column, you can see William Hadcroft, Manchester. So that's me. And she said, right, go and have a look at that package on the mantelpiece in the living room. And I went and opened it up, and this was in it. So can you see it there? Doctor Who sound effects. I was absolutely astounded. Look at that. It's in bad shape because it's over 40 years old. That's why. It's all falling apart there, as you can see. Yeah, so I won the Doctor Who sound effects record, thrilled to bits with it. And the funny thing was, we just played it that night like a conventional LP. So we put it on the family stereo and just played it right through like a music record. So you've got all these noises coming on one after the other. And the TARDIS was going, and I knew what the noises were, so I'd say, "Oh, that's the doors, and that's the scanner screen, and that's the inside of the TARDIS noise." And my grandmother was completely befuddled by it. I can remember just staring at it and going to my mother, "What is it again, Margaret? What is it? Is one? What is it?" And my mum had to say, It's sound effects, Mother. I remember her telling me, sound effects. It's for when people make plays and they need a background noise. And these were all the background noises from Doctor Who.
Have you ever used it for anything?
Oh, yes. So I used to make my own Doctor Who plays, yeah. Much like the guys who originated Big Finish, when they were kids. I was doing the same. I think lots of Doctor Who fans from my generation were doing the same. A tape recorder, sound effects album, the theme music single, and then roping in as many people who would agree to participate. And if none of them agreed to participate, you did it all yourself. And my family will laugh about the days when they would hear me in my bedroom talking to myself in different voices as I played out these little episodes that I'd done. But it's funny that this really, at age 10, this was the beginnings of me being a writer, really. Because that's the first time I saw my name in print in a magazine, and that cast a spell on me. Then the record leads to me making up my own Doctor Who stories on audio, and then you fast forward 4 decades, and I'm still making Doctor Who stories on audio, but they're being published by BBC Audio. There's a funny thing as well. going back to the resurrection plan, side 2, track 16, is Gallifreyan Stasis 3 blasts, right? So you get that bang, that noise 3 times over. So in the resurrection plan, there's a scene where the Doctor and one of the other characters and Jamie, they hear the sound of a Gallifreyan Stasis in the distance. And Jamie says, "What's that?" And one of the other characters says, "It's a Gallifreyan Stasis gun." And then the Doctor says, "3 blasts." And that's a direct reference to that LP. Gallifreyan Stasis gun, 3 blasts.
That's brilliant.
And nobody noticed it. No, John Ainsworth and Michael Stevens, if they noticed, they never said.
They never let on.
But 1 or 2 listeners have done.
Yeah.
I think Dan Hadley picked up on it from Side 40.
Favorite BBC audio. So this was from Nicholas Briggs, narrator of The Power of the Daleks, and he says, "It's lovely that fellow fans have voted for The Power of the Daleks. Patrick Troughton is my favorite Doctor, so it was a real honor to be asked by Michael Stevens to perform this one. And yes, I am indeed old enough to remember watching it as a youngster." And then there's some words cut off here. But at the top, his first place was obviously Power of the Daleks. Second place, The Resurrection Plan. And third is Code of Flesh. Was that surprising?
It was a delight. I mean, Code of Flesh is written by Andy Lane. We'll get that one in. I met Andy at a convention in Blackpool. And he was as thrilled to meet me as I was to meet him. So we've got to mention Andy Lane there. What's interesting for me, I mean, it's lovely to be second in a poll voted for by Doctor Who fans, but The Power of the Daleks is a novelization reading. It's a target book reading, whereas Resurrection Plant and Code of Flesh are audio originals. So if the audio originals, and I'm not making a big deal out of this, but if the audio originals were a category in their own right, then Andy Lane's Code of Flesh will be second and mine will be first. But the magazine obviously doesn't make a distinction between a target reading and an audio original. So that's how it's come out. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Second to Nicholas Briggs reading The Power of the Daleks. Yeah, brilliant. Delight.
Yeah, and that's a big Doctor Who name to get that shout out from as well, Nicholas Briggs.
Yeah. It's lovely to be alongside him. The artwork for mine is alongside the artwork for his. Yeah. Lovely. Yeah.
Well, whilst
we're
on the subject of the one and only Nicholas Briggs, have you or would you ever write for Big Finish? And which Doctor would you pitch for?
Ooh, now you're talking. Well, first of all, Big Finish don't accept unsolicited material. They approach you, just like BBC Audio did. So Nick and John Dorney, who's one of the script editors, Matt Fitton, another one of the script editors. I think it would be the script editors who make the approach. Whereas Nick's an exec producer, isn't he, with Jason Hay-Gallery? And of course, he's written and directed many of them and even starred in them. So I think it will be one of the script editors that made the approach if that was to happen. So I would love to do a Big Finish. I mean, the audio originals are wonderful, but it's one voice reading a prose story. Whereas a Big Finish is a full cast audio drama and script writing. Before I started writing prose and publishing novels, I really, as a teenager, the intention was to be a script writer, a television script writer in particular, but script writer nonetheless. And I felt I had an aptitude for that. And it ended up doing novels because it was so hard to get into script writing. So if the offer was ever made, I would love to do it. I imagine there'll be some sort of consternation over whether or not I can make the transition from prose to script. I think I could. I think I am aware that it's a different discipline, writing scripts, but I've done a little bit of that unpaid, you know, for fan productions. There's a Bolton-based Doctor Who amateur dramatics Doctor Who group called Fine Line, and I wrote a story called The Cathaith Factor for them. So I have scripted a Doctor Who. It's an unofficial one, and that got made by them. So yeah, it'd be lovely. If I was to write for Big Finish, which Doctor? Well, it would have to be Colin Baker, wouldn't it? You know, I have an idea for a Colin Baker story that would work as an audio original. And I have another idea, which could be any Doctor really, which would work very well as a play. But I have to wait to be asked. And one of the things is that you can sort of, you know, you let yourself, you can let it be known that you want to write for them. Certainly, you know, you can go to Big Finish Day or any event where Big Finish people are going to be present, and introduce yourself. You know, if you've written fan fiction, if you've written audio plays that have been put up on YouTube or, you know, digital download for free, it's all done for fun. The fact that you're doing it it's a good sign, you know. I'm sure John Ainsworth approached me because he knew I was writing things. He knew I was busy getting on with it, even though it was small time and, you know, nothing like the sort of prestigious stuff that the BBC are knocking out. But if people see that you really mean it, you want to be a writer and you want to write a Doctor Who, if you really do, you are already doing it, really. You know, you don't sit there going, you know, oh, I'd love to do one of these. You are doing it, and you're finding other people to help you make it a reality. So I think if BBC Audio or Big Finish know your name, you know, and some people have got in there, haven't they? I've noticed, what's he called? Dominic G. Martin, is it? The Purple Doctor, as he was. He made a load of fan Doctor Who films with himself as the Doctor and a team of writers, and, you know, very well made, and into sound design, and, you know, he knows what he's doing, and he now works for Big Finish in that capacity and as a writer, I think. So, you know, you let it be known that you're keen, and you might get invited. It's hard. It is pretty much a closed shop, you know, but you show them that you're knocking the stuff out and that you can do it. When they're starting to think of taking new people on, they may think of you. They may think of me, hopefully.
They may think of you, but that's also sound advice for young writers as well, isn't it? Because obviously this is it's not an easy thing to get into.
Yeah.
So if I want to do a voiceover for Big Finish, even though Colin's put in a good word for me, I still have to wait for them to approach me.
Yeah,
you know,
let them know what you're doing. If you've got a portfolio of stuff, you know, or CD or whatever, give them the CD.
Yeah,
talk to them at their desks, you know, when they've got their dealer's room going and all of that.
That's brave and approach.
Yeah, I remember Gary Gillett, the former editor of Doctor Who magazine. I had a video years ago, and I actually attended the event. It was when Doctor Who magazine was 30 years old, so it would have been 1999. Doctor Who birthday bash, and they filmed it, and in one of the extras on the video there was an interview with Gary Gillett, the then current editor, and they asked him how he got on, you know, as editor of the magazine, and he said, well, he used to work for other magazines, and he basically put together a portfolio of stuff he'd done, and then every time there was a Doctor Who convention and Doctor Who magazine were there, he would go up to the then current editor and show them his portfolio and say, you know, I would like to write for Doctor Who magazine. And I don't know how many times he did it, but it certainly would have been more than once. And he made an impression. So you've got to have that balance, haven't you, of making an impression but not pestering them. You know, if you get on their nerves, you're never going to get in there, are you? You know?
No, never.
So you've got to have the balance right. Be professional when you make the approach. And then, of course, when his predecessor, who preceded him? Was it John Freeman? I can't remember now. But whoever preceded Gary, when it came up for, you know, replacing the editor, they knew that Gary had the discipline as a writer, and he'd worked editing other magazines, and he also understands the financing of a magazine. So he got the job on that basis. But you know, they knew who he was because he'd spoken to them several times. So yeah, if they don't know who you are, they're never going to ask you, are they?
No, they never will. So obviously that's sound advice for young writers. Also for young writers, have you as a writer sussed out any particular type of formula for the BBC audiobooks that you would perhaps recommend for young writers to use it with regards to Doctor Who, just in case they ever are approached?
Well, if they're writing, it depends what they're writing. Of course, if they're writing prose, then you know, write what you want to hear. You know, the sort of Doctor Who story you want to hear. I wrote a story that interests me, but then you've got to think about, well, what's popular. You know, what kind of Doctor Who stories are popular? I went for that industrial setting because I know it works very well. It's on another planet, it's on a planetoid on the other side of the universe, but it feels very much like the Industrial Revolution in the north of England. And I knew that the sound effects would draw all that out as well. So you've got to use your head, you know. The Talons of Wen Chiang is superb. Everybody loves it. Maybe set one in Dickensian London, you know, or in Conan Doyle London. So you just think about it. You know, obviously you don't want to rip off things that have been done before, or you don't want it to look like a copy. You're just copying Robert Holmes or something. But the way I've approached it so far is just to think, you know, what kind of Doctor Who stories are always a hit, and then try and devise one of your own, not with the same ingredients, but with the same flavour. If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And then you're halfway there to it being a winner, you know. But it's a fine balance. Again, there's a fine balance between paying homage and plagiarizing something, you know. So you have to be careful. You've got to think it through.
And there's a lot of Doctor Who stories out there, so you really do have to be careful.
And then you've got to try and be original as well, you know, because you don't want it to be always copying that. You know, they'll see it a mile off if they recognize that you're trying to mimic something. So you have to get the flavor and the tone of something, but it's got to be an interesting new take.
Have you got any more audiobooks coming out with the BBC?
Yes, I have. Yes. There's one coming out on the 18th of July. In fact, not that many weeks away now. It's called Dark Contract. It's a Fifth Doctor, Adric, Tegan and Nyssa story, and it's set in Dickensian London. So I can't wait for that. Having heard the Resurrection Plant, and it's the same team behind it. So the sound design is by David Rucroft again, who did the Resurrection Plant. And he picked up so much on my descriptive, you know, passages. I mean, when it talks about a klaxon going off in the distance in the Foundry, and then you hear a klaxon in the soundscape. I can't sing his praises highly enough. And I know that David Rucroft has done the sound design on Dark Contract. So to hear the Peter Howell theme at the beginning and then go into the story, Matthew Waterhouse is reading it. I haven't heard anything from it. I won't get to hear it till it's published. So I am ecstatic. I'm close to combusting, waiting for it. Yeah. So if you like the Resurrection Plant, Dark Contract should not disappoint.
Matthew Waterhouse is reading it. That's fantastic. He's actually a very good reader. Have you been able to speak to him about the book at all?
Nope. I've not had any correspondence with him at all. And, you know, obviously he has recorded the thing, but he's not got in touch to say anything about it. So I just hope he enjoyed reading it. I know I'll enjoy listening.
I know I can't answer for him, but I'm sure he did. Obviously, he's probably contractually bound anyway, perhaps to not release any details on it or anything like that. So
if he thinks it's rubbish, I don't want to know. So maybe it's as well.
I'm sure he won't think it's rubbish. I'm sure he won't. But you'll get to see him after, I guess, and speak to him about it.
I'll bump into him at some point, sure.
Yeah. That would be brilliant. So that's coming out on the 18th of July. So what was it called again?
Dark Contract.
Dark Contract, read by Matthew Waterhouse. And where can viewers find you and the copy of The Resurrection Plant?
Well, I'm on the internet all over the place, really. I have a website that I've neglected for far too long. So that's willhadcroft.com. There's not much on it really worth looking at, I don't think, unless you want to look at my old things. There's plenty about those. Obviously, I'm on Facebook. I post stuff on there. I'm on Twitter. I've also set up an account on Blue Sky. Do you know about that? That's the sort of, I believe one of the original creators of Twitter has set this up. So Blue Sky is like Twitter and operates to the rules that Twitter used to operate before a certain somebody bought it and changed the rules. So I'm trying to build up a Blue Sky account. So if you're on that, you know, hook up with me on there. If you're not on that, get on it and hook up with me on there. Because once I've got, you know, enough of a following on Blue Sky, I will be sort of paying more attention to that than Twitter really in the future. Yeah. So Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky are my main socials. And I pop up all over the place. You might see me from time to time talking to Dan Hadley on Type 40, and those gentlemen in Australia at the Sirens of Audio, Dwayne and Philip. I've spoken to them about this release, and I will be going to see them again. Not going to Australia, but going to see them via the internet soon to talk about Dark Contracts. So yeah, I pop up all over the place. You can't avoid me, really.
I'll make sure to link all of your socials below. I always link my sources anyway, so I'll make sure I would do that for you so that people can find you. Well, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me today, and it was a pleasure having you here on Chat About It, Don't Shout About It. Will I be seeing you again soon?
Well, we shall see.
We shall see, shall we?
After the 18th of July, you never know.
Well, there you go, everyone. If you can think of any questions you would like to ask Will, then feel free to put it in the comments below. So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Will Hadcroft, the author of The Resurrection Plant. Of course, leave your questions for him down below and leave any other comments down below that you would like to leave. Remember to chat about it, don't shout about it. Join me tomorrow for TV and Movie Monday at 4 p.m. Like this video if you would like to and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.